Hi, and welcome to Module 6, where we'll talk about startings and flows and a lot of all these different programming features that you can add into your development. So the first thing, obviously, as we already talked about, all flows must have a start. Somehow it must be triggered, and you can have a start message, and there's also a start event if you have enabled the events in your system. You can create in one iFlow, you can have multiple integration processes. They just need to be with separate URLs, but from the same server. So that makes sometimes a little easier to create some things to understand what's going on. And other times, you just want to create it as separate flows. So one thing that we have is we have a timer, and the timer is really great. So I use it in two ways. So it has the run once. So once you've added it, you can say run once, and that will mean that it will just run one time. And that's really good. So it will run once you deploy the iFlow. And for developing it, that's what you want, because then you can just say deploy. It will run as soon as it's deployed, and it's really a good time to test something. And also, if you do not have access to run flows on the system, you can also use this option. The other option is you can schedule it to run on a specific date. If you have a job that just needs to run on next Friday, you can use the schedule on day. The most probably the one you would probably use is the schedule to reoccur, and you'll set this to every day, every hour, and you can specify on a specific time on that day or every second between that. I probably would not recommend doing that. So yeah, you can specify some specific times when it should be up. And do notice you should be setting the time zone so it matches the time zone that you want it in. So this obviously have an impact what time zone you choose this to be. So one thing just to notice is that once you start up this, let me just show you here. So if you have starting a new flow, then you would just need to delete the start, delete it, and then you can create a new one. Here we got all the different events. You just select the one that says timer. You can insert it and start the flow, and then you can specify on a specific time or the reoccurrence part of this. So discard, so don't want this change. So those are really critical and useful for running something every night, stuff like that. Yes. The next one is errors, and obviously we don't want any errors. And in most cases, we just want our process to finish and be happy every hour after. But obviously, in some cases, you want to mark this as an error, and you want to give some users an idea about what you can actually see in this. So there's a few things that you can do with this. There's an error end, and the error end will just terminate the message and say, hey, it is terminated. There's an escalation where you can actually give some explanation and say that this is escalated because we're missing some different data. And you got the termination where it would just terminate after it has stopped processing. I just want to also, so we can just have a look at this. So if we look at our flow here, we got these different alerts coming up. So we got an end here, error end. We got a termination. So let me just run this. So the thing that this opts into is we having a, and that's the reason why I want to take the next slides also. So I just want to talk a little about the routing. So with routing, you have an exclusive gateway that will just process all the different events in the order they occur, then it will run those events or that event that matches the expression, and there must be a default gate that will just go and be processed at the end. So that brings us to this experiment that we're creating. So I just want to go also to our monitoring. So in my Postman, I have here, and here I have some different statuses. So I think the first one, if we take the error end, we can see our routing, and this just says it's the status equals OK. So we'll put in that status and we'll check the message. So we can see that the flow processed OK, we got a 200 error back. So let's see what we're getting over here in the log. We can see that the message was completed successfully. I'll just also change the logging just so we can see a little more if that becomes required. So the next is I want to send a termination event. And when we look at terminations, we don't have any other options. So it's with status T, capital. So it still ends OK. And the termination, so I would have expected it to run. Let's see. Just because it needs to be updated. We obviously need to check the right place. So I think sometimes you can see some extra information here that it's being terminated. But termination is just if you have a lot of other steps or processes inside of this or splitting, then the process would be terminated and ended at this point in time. So if that's what you want, then you want to go with the termination. Then we got an error event here, and the routing here is error, and we don't have any configuration here. So let's call that one. So we can see here now we're getting a message that status failed. We're just getting that an error exception have occurred, and you can look at the trail or the log viewer here to see what was going on in it. It probably is not the right way because the error event is normally used inside a process, but if you need to trigger an alert from a flow, then this could be it. The last one is probably more relevant. This is our default route. So if we just put something else, so let's just see here. Then we got an escalation event. We can see that an internal server error. And when we check our log up here, we can see that this was escalated. And I think if we go and check our log, even though it's information, it just says ended with an escalation. And then in previous flows, or however you want it, you can see what's going on there. So I think in this one you have different options. You have a condition not met, no authorization to revoke. So it has some predefined, making it quite useful to just report some status back. But kind of strange that it does not give that information unless it puts something into the header. Which it does not either. So you would just need to know that there's an escalation event, or past that there's an escalation event. Go check it out and see what's in that specific area. Good. So that was the routing and the different alerts that you can put into your flow. And routing is, like the if that you have, that you can say we can do, if this is the case, then do this, or maybe else, or if else, and otherwise. Then we got the multicast, and the multicast has two different options. It has a sequential and a parallel. And the benefit of using that one is if I put in is that these branches, so once the message is started, it will process the first branch it has in the order, then it will process the next branch that it has in order. And that means if you have some data that is coming into the branch, as if we had taken our data over here, if this one was escalation or a multicast, we would then just do that, change it to a multicast. So, and no matter which of them, where if it's sequential, they will just be processed one by one on the parallel. So if we just put in one of these, we can see when we're clicking this one, that's the sequential one, it has a sequence. You can run these in that specific sequence. You can move the branch up or down, so it will run one branch before the other. But that means once the message gets here, it will then process branch 1 first, and then once it has processed branch 1 first, it will then go to branch 2 and process that one. It will have the same content as we have up here, which makes it pretty useful if you want to call out some service, get the data back, and just process with the same data as you have in the beginning, instead of having to save the variable, retrieve it, get that data back. There is some limitation, is that you do not, as default, have access to the content in the other branch once it's being executed or once it has been processed. So that gives some limitations on this. The option you do have is you can put in the aggregator, the gather afterwards, and then you can put in some different flows that say, okay, we got these two messages being processed, then they will be combined to a specific flow, and you can then use it at the end. And yeah, if you select the parallel, it will obviously run both of them in the same parallel thing. Next up is we have the splitter. And the splitter is one that takes a document and split it into multiple different options or cases or documents. And then each of these documents is then processed one by one. There's quite a few different splitters, so we have some here in module number 2, part number 2. So here I've just created a general splitter, and on this one we have XPath. We also have line breaks as different options. We have parallel executions, how many concurrent processes, if it should stop, if it reaches an exception, or just continue to the end. There is also a whole bunch of different ones. So we got all of these iterating splitter, IDOC splitter, and some certificate splitter, if you probably know if you want to use that. So the iterating splitter has some other options that you can then use and token as you want to. If you have some specific area in the document, it will just use that one. Line break. So that is an option. And yeah, so if you process this one, it will then run each different attempt. I think I specified this to just streaming or non-streaming. That it will take one part of the document, run it once, then the next part, and then you may want to do something inside of this. And remember, in the previous we also had the option of using the looping call, where this one is just taking a document. The looping would just say, hey, I got my full context, I'll run these different loops a couple of times. So the next one that's relevant in this case is then the gather, and the gather would then take these two different documents that you have got, and combine them into one document. So in the case we have here, it will then, we can combine those different incoming formats depending on what we have. If they're different or same format, how we need to combine them, the documents, and I guess there's not much if it's text. I guess we can just concatenate them. Same format. So I've just done a little header content here. It's not doing that much. So let's just save this as a version. Oh, no configuration deployed. And then we can run this. And so if we run this, we are sending in a body that looks like this. Closing element tag for user. Something must go wrong here. Let's just pause. So the problem was that played around with the XPath expression to a not good case, and that gave, well, it was trying to pass the document for every line, and then once we were trying to do the gathering, it did not really know what was going on in the document. So let's just try again. So now we can see that if we have this one as some XML that's getting, we can see it now creates a multi-mapping part in this document, and it makes it easier to see what you have in the content, and you can then go through the document, figure out what you want to look at, and if you had multiple, then you would have multiple message ones here. So one thing that's worth noting is if you want to do XPath with this, once you have it in with multimap or however you want to do it, in here in the configuration header namespace mapping, you can insert the configurations or the namespaces that you want without the colon. Example, So then if I in my document want to do format with this, I can just refer to whatever in my XPath. So that was the process of, I'll just check it out. We can see the processing if we just set it to trace. Just show you what's going on inside of this. So when the trace is really useful in these cases like this, where you want to understand what is going on. So we can see that the splitter has been executed a number of times. You got the general splitter, content modifier, and this one I was just saying I'm just putting the payload into here, but that's on header. Oh, yeah, you can first see it afterwards. So there was some Apache input cache stream. So we executed once, we executed, then we go back and start. So I guess this is the general, this is first time it's called. And we can then see the payload that's being sent into each of them. So it does have the root element in this case, but just different user segments in. And then we would get our gather here at the end, and we can check out our document that as it looks like. So then we got the next one, and this is also, let's see if we skip one. So the aggregator is the one you want to use if you have some messages that needs to be collected and then be processed at the end or combined to one message. So in a PO scenario, one of the patterns would be IDOC collection, where you wanted to send 5 IDOCs, and once you have processed 5 IDOCs, you want to send them on to whatever area that you want to do. And this is really simple implementing in the tool with this aggregator, because you can just say it will go to that step, wait until some criteria has been met, and once that's met, it will then process the remaining part of it. So let me just show you what this looks like. So we have this one with some unsaved changes. So we here specify our order as the root element, or rooted/order. So if we look at back our XML document for number 3, we can see we got our order number here. So we will call it based on this document. So all numbers that has number 5 will get it there. And then we can have, in our strategy, we can combine the messages with a sequence number. So this could be what time or IDOC number or something like that. So we know they will always be processed or added into the same flow. And we can specify that it needs to be run for a specific, if it has not completed within this amount of time, it will work there. And we can also just combine them. So it will just take them in some order, depending on what the status is and what the relevance is. So just combine them. And then you can say last message, what that should be. So we need to just say that that's true in the last one. So let's try to deploy. Let's see what it looks like. And let me also set this one into trace. See here. So debug is good. And if you then switch to trace afterwards, it'll go back to debug. So we will try to send a new one. This one should be false. So now we have created number 5. We can see we got a message here. It starts a root node and then just one that says, hey, until the artifact, we've completed this. If we run it once more, we are getting some data back here that says, hey, we have created this number of messages. They are all in the same one, and this one is then just processed as true. We can check out each of the different payloads here, and if we try to set this as true, I guess this one done equals to true. Then we can see it has been processed. I'm not sure we'll see it here, but we can then see our full payload here. We can see all the messages that has been combined, and if we look at, I guess, the trace level on this one, we can see it has called this set API key, whatever that one is doing in this step. We got our payload, and we can then see it has aggregated all of these documents into one document using the multi-map approach also in this this part. So that makes this pretty good way to collect messages, and we can then see each of the different aggregators once they've been called. One other thing, as you saw here, we specified a data store name. So we can specify what are actually the area we want to aggregate this, and this gives us a little different idea about some of these messages that we have. So let me just start a new one. So now we can see we got some data store for this this specific data. So we can see on this one we got these date that is due at some point in the future. And we can go in and see the specific message. We can see what are the messages that we already have in our content. So we can just send a few more of these, number 7. We should have gotten a few more messages up here. And we can drill in and see what they are related to. And then I guess that once they have been processed, at the end they will both create a new processes up here. So that shows a little of what you can actually do, aggregating in really a simple process. So what we've taken away from here is there's a lot of different flows you can use to create the normal things you do in a programming language, like if split, like for each processing, do something with the data afterwards. Where used, or where used, case switch and branching. So this conclude this lesson. Hope it has been useful.